Okay, we're going to take a look at these anomalies here that we find in sub-Saharan Cape area of South Africa. They're tentatively called cattle crawls, and we're going to take a Google Earth image look down here real close at these things, somewhat of a 3D image view. And I think you remember my site on Blombos Caves, which is located right into here, and then also the Hoffmeyer site, which is also located, I believe, right about here. So not but maybe a couple of 100 miles away from this, or at least the area we're going to look at right now. As we come into this area, you can tell that there's a fertile river valley that used to actually run through this entire area. That there was a fertile river valley that was all located in through here, a mountainous area off near to it, and indeed some rivers running all over the place from here, not too far from the coast, and on an escarpment that is up a little higher than the surrounding ground that leads in down into the ocean. Now, when we look at these, the oddity of them is that they have a similar shape to each other, but yet neither one are uniform with the other. It's there's no constant design to it. It's almost like a snowflake. And you look at something like these, and some of these have 2, 3, 4, and 5 little circlets here. In these circlets, though, there's really no doorway, no entrances that lead into this, right? It's just kind of kept separated. There are other ones that look like it's just one ring with one central area. We can see that this is a valley in between the two areas right here too, and these are set on ledges and even leaned. They're not on flat ground. So I've heard all kinds of silly things about these, where these are where they would pool up water and there would be gold latent in the water. And I think people are reading into the Sitchin thing about how there originally was gold latent water and how would you get it out of them. And so they would say they would fill these things all up with water and let them settle out gold, like repeatedly over and over again. I don't know if they let it evaporate out. Other people said it's for like electroplating, and somehow they had solar energy going on. David Icke has come up with a lot of weird conjecture off these and saying that there's actually some resonance that goes on, like a whoo, whenever you're around and in certain ones of these, like people report in crop circles, things like this. I've heard people say that these are ancient crop circles that were all made. I've heard just a myriad of different things. Cattle crawls is really the common thing that you get, but then you'd have to say, well, what are we doing here? Okay, well, this wall, some of these are, 10, 15 foot tall. And other ones, of course, are so filled up with sediment, they're just barely sticking above the ground. But if we dug them all out, no telling how tall they would be. In fact, the 15 to 20 foot tall ones, maybe taller than that. They could be huge, looking something like Great Zimbabwe. The stonework isn't incredible like that, but yet the amount of these, there are literally a few 100,000 of these. People say 10 million and all this stuff, but there's literally a few 100,000 of these. And always when you're looking at them, you can see ones that are pretty well defined, and then just right next to it, you can see one that's pretty much smeared and gone away. And this might lead one to believe that this one's a lot older and this one's a little bit newer, that this one had gotten abandoned and this one was new. Why wouldn't they just clean the thing out? I don't know. There's a lot of stupid questions that go along with this and a lot of strange answers that really lead to a lot of conjecture and a lot of things that seem false. But I'm just going to try to stay within the boundaries of reality here and bounce off a few ideas with you here. You can see how this goes up a rise and then boom and then up another rise, and that's where this one is on that rise, and up this rise there's another one, and up here in this rise there's a few more of them. Some of these just well defined. Other ones seem to have lines connecting between them. You have one here and you have a line connecting over here, and you can see the distinct lines in it. Also, strangeness here, there's wiggles on the ground here that looks like this had been flooded out at one time pretty bad. And it's possible that back in time, whenever this actually used to be extremely fertile and probably covered with trees and vegetation and a lot more life than we would ever find in sub-Saharan Africa now in this arid state that it's in, that it could have flooded out and caused all these wiggles that you see in through here. And indeed, it leads to like little small, little micro river valleys. And again, this all attaches to this great river valley here, just right off to the side. But yet the people aren't apparently living right there on that valley, but off here and slightly in higher ground, maybe for a reason. But there are lines cut into the ground here, and you can see ancient, what they would call as cattle trails running through here. And you can see that river running off. Now the view's changing here, but so you look through these, and they go and go and go, and then sometimes you'll have these little, what looks like a two-rutted road, but these are little walls. So is this a procession area? Well, it leads by this crawl, and then it keeps going up here and leads into, and then just stops right at this little micro river that all dried up. And it doesn't continue on the other side. Would this be taking you from off this river and you walk down this procession down to that river? Um, are there animals here like lions and stuff so badly that the people are living inside of these sheltered areas? Whenever they walk from little village to village or hut to hut, they've made walls to where no lions can get to them. I mean, we can go with a lot of silly conjecture here, but do people live inside of these? Are they raising animals in each one of these? Do they throw ducks in here and they throw goats in here? Because they call them cattle crawls, but there's no cattle or domesticated animals. They're all open Sumerian stuff at this time. Conservative dates go at around 12 to 20,000 years, but no one has looked into this well enough to give any idea of truth and reality to it. Indeed, you'd have to excavate a few of these, a series of them in a few different areas to get an idea of the span of time that we may be talking about. Again, you see a lot of them that are just totally buried, and other ones that look a little more fresh and new. Were they just a little taller? Are they in a better spot? Are they, not swamped under by what looks like floods? And you look here and you can see all this wiggling running around through here. And does it look like a big flood ran through here at one time? It's just like another thing of the flood. And you look at these escarpments and how it runs uphill. So this idea that you'd fill them with water when they're laid on these angles is really not a correct idea to hold. Indeed, I guess it could be for some of them, but then that makes no sense to the rest of it. I think a lot of those people are trying to connect it to the Anunnaki story about how they used people to collect and mine gold, and here we go. Well, by the time that they supposedly did this would have been mining, direct mining by the Igigi, and it wouldn't have been actual water collective like this that we think of in the even supposed story. So it just seems strange. The other anomalies you have here, you can see there's a lot of green life here, but I guarantee the whole area looked like this, if not nicer, all the way through the Pliocene up until now. And only recently has this just driven into an arid land. Look at this Stonehenge next to what looked like they're a Nazca line. So now we're going to start looking at some of these lines. Like if you look in the distance here, this line. And if you look on the edge of this escarpment here, here's what's known as Adam's Calendar. It's a standing stone circle, very Stonehenge-ish. And the anomaly here is that it only dates to about 12,000 years ago, or possibly 70,000 years ago, where it lines up astrologically with a lot of things, Of course, you're trying to connect it and say it all connected to this, and the rising of Orion. Here's another big anomaly here. I don't know if you can see it well in the picture, but from this spot here, there are concentric rings that all come out here, that each one is about a football field in distance, And this little circle, circle, circle pattern here that's kind of reminiscent of the tail, I guess, on the Nazca lines, or maybe really just a set of rings, or like waves extending from a pebble dropped in a pond where you see the ripples that are coming out. And these are walls that are built that make a circumference that's about 2 kilometers across, and half of it's kind of covered under, and this half is not. So here's a lot of these crawls that you see, and of course there are still a lot of vegetation points around, but I'd like to mention, look at this incised line that comes up and runs right down that tree line. You can see it running right down the inside of that tree line. Sure, there's a tree on this side and a couple right there, but other than that, there's this perfect line, almost like a little irrigation ditch, something along that line, yet there's no water leading into it. There don't appear to be a creek or anything running in, so it's not that, but it's a delineation line, and indeed this vegetation grows there and not here. You know, so you can tell it's been set and used for a certain purpose. It has a reason behind it. And again, look at this Nazca line effect here, where it runs over and through that little river valley there and back on this other mound here, showing you that it really doesn't seem to be that precession concept I spoke of, but maybe like a Nazca line where perhaps it leads somewhere. Is the idea that, well, if you look at the amount of these, there must have been hundreds of thousands of people living here doing this. And so maybe when the population gets to be too much of a burden and it started aerating, drying up, these people would make a line and go that way. They would follow certain stars as they ran into the ground during the night or whatever, and they would say, we're going to keep following that, you know, some astrological thing, and then these lines point to those in the direction they at least began to go in the first place. Well, if you look at something like this, it just leads to nowhere. Here's a trail that leads off, and are we going to cut down to the right and run down through there? Are we going to try to keep up with those stars in some way? There's no line past it. It curves on that mountain ridge, if you saw right at the very end. Look at some of these things that have a squared off effect. I mean, look how this runs straight square and straight square, literally. And then on the edge of this, which is an escarpment, this area down here is 50, 60 foot lower than up here, if not more. And you can see all these crowls. Again, circles, inside circles, inside circles, that are somewhat bisected and interconnected on some of these larger ones. Other ones are not. Some just have a circle and a circle like that one there. Here's a weird anomaly where it just has an eye and there's a square. Some of these you can tell are just melded under, you know, looks like that may have been flooded under. You can see this creek bed that runs through here in micro creeks. And I'm telling you, this place used to be extremely vegetated back in the day, but is now somewhat an arid desert. But looking across this, look at this Nazca line effect here and how it's bisected and again cut across through here. And this is not anything modern. This is stuff that you can't even see whenever you're on the ground. You have to look at it flying over. Like the Nazca lines, you'll never know it's there. And there's a river there, but then up here is where the Cralls are, where we went just past a river. But you can see Collection Valley there and a river running down. They would only be setting themselves in these situations if it was quite rainy. Like whenever you go camping in an area like that, you'd pick a higher ground and run off in case it rains. That shows you that this area must have been extremely vegetated when these people made this. There's other people that say this is only 600 or 800 years old, but I don't think anybody's investigated to the point of being able to tell you how old it really is. And I haven't heard a good reason for the purpose of it yet. Nothing that I could go with other than saying it was protection from animals and that people would go inside these things to dwell in peace at nighttime and things, whenever hyenas and lions and things would come, you know, out whenever the spooks come out at night. Look at this thing to the left. how far that runs, this Nazca line effect here that runs. And it looks like it tabulates here on the deal for about 8 miles and then runs right into that river. There's other ones that bend and run around. You can see a terracing effect right there that almost looks man-made, or it helped, but also washed under. And then look how it connects to this Nazca line here that again runs off for a few kilometers. There's a lot of lines there. So this is, pre-Neolithic timing, it seems, and a strange building. Some of those, like the one we just went by, are huge and would have held an entire tribal people, perhaps. But yet there are ones connected all right to it, and small and big and little, and just no real common sense or unity to it. Again, lines connecting a few together, and walls that right there, if you saw, had a zigzag effect and were exactly straight, whereas a lot of them are circular, some are straight. And you can see as we zoom out here how they collect around this big river valley here that used to be primordial, and this one up here, and run in between but on the higher ground. And then over here, you see there's a valley running kind of down through there. Then right here they start showing up again like crazy, right? And then here's that escarpment, and down here to the right is where we see Adam's calendar. As we come up to it, there's Adam's calendar, and you can see that extinct fertile river valley that runs all the way down through, and in fact leads down to that Blombos cave site that I was speaking about just the other day. Like, share, and subscribe, guys, and let me know what you think down in the comments about all the possibilities. I mean, I've heard 1,000 different stories. I don't agree with even portions of most of them. Enjoy.